little mentality in the business. Oh, the sky's falling. This latest thing. How are we going to ever survive this? We just have to be able to put things a little bit in perspective and fight for the things that we do think are important. Humility is another thing that gets lost sometimes on younger people. I think they've been told they're wonderful so much that they believe their own press. And there's something to be said for using the pronoun we instead of I or me all the time and being a little bit vulnerable, making fun of yourself. I remember some of the best companies that were formed in the worst of time. There are entrepreneurs in this business that are out there waiting to try their stuff. The value that they bring is not just in the stuff they provide, it's really in the loyalty they build among their members.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wisdom from the Helm, where we go beyond the typical highlight reels of real estate's most trusted women to reveal the secrets of their success, not just in business, but also in life. We're your hosts, Danielle Wilkie and Heather Frick, and today we are so excited to welcome Pam O'Connor, who is an advisor to us at the Helm and a true icon in the real estate industry, a pioneer whose leadership didn't just shape a company, but helped transform an entire sector of our industry, which is so exciting. And most people in real estate already know Pam, but for those that don't, here's why you should listen to when this woman speaks. Pam O'Connor was the founding president and CEO of leading real estate companies of the world, a position she held for over 2 decades. And under her leadership, Leading RE grew into one of the most respected and expansive global networks of independent brokerages with over 565 firms in more than 70 countries. But Pam's impact goes way beyond the numbers. In 1985, she became the first woman to lead a major real estate network, breaking barriers in a male-dominated field and setting a new standard for what leadership could look like in real estate. She built a platform that championed independence, innovation, and collaboration, helping brokerages around the world thrive without having to give up their unique identities. Pam's also a fierce advocate for leadership development and succession planning, having mentored hundreds of real estate leaders over the course of her career. And even in retirement, she continues to shape the industry as an advisor and board member for companies like DocuSign and Realtor and the Helm, which we love so much. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about the evolution of real estate, how Pam led through times of immense change, and what she believes the next generation of leaders needs to understand most. Pam, yay, you're here. We're so glad.
Thank you. Yeah, you reminded me of some stuff I forgot about. I'm not sure.
Well,
it's
you've
a
done
little
so
longer
much
than you needed to go, Danielle, but whatever.
You've done so much, Pam. It's hard to even get it all in. We could just make this whole episode about your bio. Frankly, you've just been so accomplished. We're so thrilled you're here. And we're just going to dive right in at first, talking a little bit about leadership and legacy, which you have so much to contribute on. And so my first question for you is, you were the first woman to lead a major real estate network. What did that moment mean to you then? And what does it mean to you now looking back?
Well, I'm almost embarrassed to tell this story, but to be perfectly candid, it really didn't occur to me for many, many years that I actually was the first woman to run a major network. And the only reason I really thought about it was that I think it was the old Better Homes and Gardens, not the Realogy version. And they promoted a woman who was their attorney to be their CEO. And it occurred to me, okay, I guess I'm the only one that's been in that role until now. I mean, that's how oblivious I was. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that. It just wasn't, it's the same thing with my first job out of college. I worked for a woman executive at a television station. And then, when I look back on it, it wasn't this, overriding, oh, wow, I'm working for a woman in management, which is so unusual in the early 70s. It was almost later that I even thought about that. So I didn't ever focus on that, to be honest. That's not to say I believe very strongly in using whatever strengths you have. And I think femininity is actually real positive. I think women have a lot of traits that, you can't generalize totally, but we tend to be, I think, we're nurturing, we're multitaskers, we have good emotional intelligence, generally, all those things. So I don't mean that I don't use those things in the course of just naturally, but I didn't dwell on the fact that I'm the first woman to do this, I guess is my point. So,
Pam, what what were the kind of core values or principles that you really hung on to and used to guide you through leading RE into the powerhouse that it is and that it became?
Things that just sort of, I guess I learned growing up. My mother was a really strong personality. My dad died when I was young. I was only 12. And so she raised three young children from, at a pretty young age. And she was a strong personality and in a good way. She would remind you, if you ever remember, you may be too young to remember that old TV show Maude. B. Arthur played this role. And that was my mother. She was just a strong personality. But I grew up with just, a sense of, I remember Barbara Corcoran one time, who was one of our members back in the day before she became a television personality. And I remember she used to say, when was it? Let's see, finding opportunity is a matter of believing it's there. And so sometimes you just have to, take what's in front of you and do something with it. So I think I'm very resourceful by nature. And not long ago, someone, a member of a leading RE who I still stay in touch with, called me, and he was suggesting something that I didn't think made any sense, which is not my job anymore. I would never tell Paul what to do. Now we're good buddies, but it's his job now. But whatever the suggestion was, he said, well, if we had done this, he was in another group at the time. If we had done this back then, we would have. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that we were in the same situation, and it was basically back when Leading RE was first formed. And at that time, NRT, which was the buying arm of Realogy at the time, anywhere today, was buying companies left and right, a lot of whom were our members. And I mean, we could have just said, woe is me. And we didn't. In fact, we doubled down and really, just kept growing, and it all worked out for the best. But so I think you do have to, maybe it's in some respects, maybe it's foolish that you keep going instead of letting obstacles stop you. But I think having that tenacity is one thing. Humility is another thing that I think it gets lost sometimes on younger people. I think they've been, told they're wonderful so much, that they kind of believe their own press. And there's something to be said for using the pronoun we instead of I or me all the time. And just, really being a little bit vulnerable, making fun of yourself occasionally. I'm really good at that because I do a lot of dumb blonde things. And people say, why do you call attention to that? One of my early mentors, who was a woman back in, she was the head of women's council in Maryland a long, long time ago. I was very young. And she said, Pam, don't do that. She said, there'll be enough other people that'll bring you down. You don't need to criticize yourself. And so I don't deliberately criticize myself, but I do make fun of myself. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think people relate to you a little bit more and having a little vulnerability especially when you're somebody that others might think, would be unapproachable just because of the position. That's not what you want. You really want to hear feedback. You want people to be comfortable telling you what you don't want to hear. And that's how you get better. So, those are a few of the things.
Thanks. I love what you said, just really quick before we go to the next question. I love what you said about, having to look at the opportunity, like believing that there's an opportunity there and looking for what's right in front of you. Danielle and I talk a lot about this idea of great leaders have to understand presence and just what's here and now and having awareness of that and being adaptable. It sounds like you really deployed a lot of that adaptability and dealing with what's right in front of you versus what might come in a year or what happened last year.
My degree was in broadcast journalism. So in journalism back in the day, which I think a lot of the art of journalism, frankly, has been lost. And some of it's not their fault. Some of it's their fault. But we were taught when you were writing a story that you always ask the who, what, where, when, why, how, that you try to answer those questions. And, the lead of a story, of a written story, was always, it was a pyramid thing where you try to get the facts right up front and then you elaborate as you go through them. And, the little things like that, I would always, it just kind of analyzing the landscape of whatever period we were in, I think, where's the void? What is not getting what's the problem that's not being solved, or what's the opportunity that there's a void there that somebody's not filling that void. And one example was that I had a very lovely gal who's still a good friend who was that her title wasn't COO. She was basically she had been my competitor for many years, and when we merged a couple of the groups, I got the top job and she didn't, and which could have been very awkward. And we actually, we met, we had a very good conversation. I said, I really feel like we're partners, and we're still friends to this day. But she was married but didn't have children. I had a little girl at the time, and I knew that we had an opportunity to build the network globally. The only ones doing that at the time, I think, Remax, but they were more master franchises that they would open abroad. And I thought, there's really a place for independent real estate companies to come together on a global level. And so I said to Ruth Ann, I remember walking in her office one morning, and I said, I think there's an opportunity to do this, but as much as I'd love to be traveling abroad, I can't do it right now with Molly, being 5 or whatever she was at the time. And so she said, well, I'll do it. She loved the idea of traveling to Europe. And so she got very involved in FIAPSI, which was kind of an arm of NAR at the time. And through that, the thing just grew. And then, later, obviously, I was able to get more involved with that. But that was an example of something that, just from some of the contacts we made with international brokers, they really loved things we were doing in the U.S. and they kind of wanted an opportunity to connect. So that was sort of one of those voids that we were able to fill and just, as an example. And the thing that ties back, not to get ahead of ourselves here, but to today with this whole MLS argument, it just drives me crazy because I feel like in a lot of ways we're going backwards, not forwards. And with some of these new so-called, clear cooperation tweaks. And the thing that came up whenever we were meeting with these international brokers through the years was always, oh, you guys are so lucky to have your MLS system. It's such an amazing open marketplace that we wish we had that. And here we are kind of sabotaging ourselves. But that's another story,
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good lead in, because one of the questions I want to ask you is, what do you think is misunderstood about the power of independent brokerages?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of brokers in general, the job of a broker, no matter whether they're a franchise or an independent. So let me start there. I just feel like that's probably one of the most misunderstood and underestimated jobs because, when you think about managing independent contractors, you don't have the power of the paycheck in the same way that a regular boss does. And yet you've got to somehow counsel and guide these agents to do what they need to do to be successful. And you know what that is, but you can't tell them, in the same explicit terms that you could if you have you can hire and fire an agent, obviously, but it's not the same as a regular job, if you get my drift. So anyway, I feel like I think in general they have a very tough job and they're very resilient and they face a lot of obstacles. With independence, it's sort of that on steroids because they don't, they've kind of got to do it all themselves. They've got to create the programs and the technology and all of the resources. And that's where Leading RE kind of came into play. We were trying to sort of be the unfranchised, not, these were people that are very proud of their brands, their identities and the local flavor of that. And they didn't want to give that up. And yet, there were times when they were out there on their own, and so we were able to provide a lot of those resources and that connectivity, and just knowing that they were part of something larger than their own brokerage. And I still think there's an opportunity there. I mean, even today, when you have a couple of you've got so much consolidation, and it's tough to be an in-between size company. I think it's if you're very small and got a very small team of people, it's very doable. Obviously, if you've got some scale, it's more doable. But that in-between size is tough. And so, I think even more, you need, if you're an independent, you need that kind of tribe, so to speak, that you can you can relate to and learn from and all of that. And honestly, even I remember some of the best companies that were formed in the worst of times. Back, I remember a guy who had been on our board when I was very young at All Points, which is the early network that was kind of the predecessor. And I don't remember, he had a falling out with his partner. And so then he decided to start a new company. And it was in one of the really bad recessions. And I was, I think, in Atlanta at the time, and he came and we had lunch. And I said, Henry, what are you thinking? He said, yeah, well, I don't know. I might be crazy. And he built a beautiful, wonderful company. And so, I always feel like there are entrepreneurs in this business that are out there waiting to, try their stuff. And that's what you want. It's tougher than it used to be, I have to say, because you've got, when you're up against some of the homeless that we have, it's tough. But
yeah, you talked about the power of the tribe. It's a great segue into the question that we have is, what do you think the role of networks will play, right, in this next chapter of the industry as it's evolving? And how might that be different from what it's been?
I couldn't hear the very last part, Heather. How the role of a network, what now?
Yeah, what will networks be like? What will their role be in this next chapter of the industry, and how might that be different from what it's been in the past historically?
I think the value that they bring is, it's not just in the stuff they provide. It's really in the loyalty they build among their members, it was always funny. We had a lot of wonderful programs. We had a learning institute. We had, our luxury division. We had a lot of really great resources for our members. But when I would ask brokers, what's your favorite thing about leading RE? We had these little broker groups, sort of CEO mastermind groups that we would form, and maybe, a dozen to 20 brokers, and they would, they'd meet at our conferences and, offsite at different times throughout the year. And that was their favorite thing. And that was the thing we probably spent the least amount of money on, to develop, because it was really their program. We just, we facilitated the administration of it, but not so much they kind of ran it. And they loved connecting with one another. They loved just the ability to learn from one another, and just to know they weren't alone out there. And I think that is something that will continue. I think people need those, kind of co-consultants, whatever you want to call them. That's really, people that are in the trenches along with them, and not, sometimes people that have been in the business and then go on to teach or coach or whatever, lose sight of that. And they, it's not the same as when you're actually dealing with the same problems every day and facing the same issues. And I still do a little of that. I do some facilitation of groups. And right now I'm kind of on a hiatus with one of those. But I love that, because then you really get what they're dealing with, and how one solves it in one location is maybe an idea somebody else hadn't thought of, and it's a business that is just, when you're a broker, it's a very lonely business if you don't have a partner or somebody who's in it with you, and those in particular, the sole owners, I think really, really love. And that's one of the successes of Realty Alliance, because, which is another organization out there that Craig Cheatham runs. It's more of a, we shared a lot of the same companies that were members, but its mission was more about really just sharing ideas, and it was mostly large brokers, and we had a mix. We had large brokers and all sizes. So, but they're still doing well, and I think that's because people, they just need to be able to share those experiences with one another.
Well, we should talk about, you touched on it earlier, but we could not have an interview with you without talking about all the change happening. I mean, you've certainly seen change over the course of your career in the industry, over the last several decades, but I feel like right now feels different. It feels a little bit different, but maybe I'm wrong. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is the most pivotal turning point? Is it now? What is happening now versus what you've seen historically? Like, what are your thoughts on all the changes?
When I look back, we have had so many periods during the business that that were very, very challenging. So I don't know that this is the most. I think I will say I don't think they're having as much fun as we had. I think we somehow, managed to kind of enjoy enjoy the business even while we were, in many cases in really tough spots. Not just recessions, but I mean there were killer recessions that we dealt with. And back when interest rates were like 18%, and you had to buy down to 14, and you thought you got a real deal. And so we had that. We had the 2008 recession. When I mean that was a very scary time. A lot of tons of foreclosures, all of that. Again, when there was always I always felt like there was a Chicken Little mentality in the business a little bit, in the sense that, oh, the sky's falling. This latest thing. How are we going to ever survive this? And yet, like I said, it's the most resilient business. They always seem to come back. And right now, I mean, I think we just have to, again, be able to put things a little bit in perspective and fight for the things that we do think are important, like this whole MLS thing. I think people just don't, and buyers and sellers don't really understand it, and they're not getting the full story in many cases right now. They're being told, oh, this is for your benefit. And it's not. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to make more money. You're going to have more opportunities to sell your home when you have a large pool of buyers that have access to it. And if you're a buyer, you're going to have, you're not going to be restricted by where you can look or what you can see when it's all open to everybody. So it's a win-win for both. So I think being able to, really advocate for those things is more important than ever. And people need to stand up for what's important. NAR is at a critical juncture, I think, right now. I think that we really need a strong association in our industry. And, through the years, and I wrote an article about this, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And when, a lot of this was when they were starting to have their leadership issues and, the rotations and all that. And they have, frankly, I think, gotten off course, and their mission has gotten so broad, they've kind of forgotten the core, what they really do bring to the table. But at the same time, I think there's a real opportunity for them if they can get back to sort of the focal point of where they really need to be, which is advocating for the industry. They do a great job with lobbying. I mean, we hear, lobbyists kind of have a bad, brand out there, which in many cases is legitimate. But I think NAR has done a lot of good things for home buyers and for people that we represent as an industry, and they also, it's that one entity that everybody's part of. But where they've gone off course is just so much politics, and I don't think they've recruited the right leaders. I don't mean staff wise. I mean, it's gotten to be, this little meal ticket for a couple of years to, and a status thing. And so people that are really serious about their businesses don't have time to fiddle with that. And so you don't get the best people in those volunteer positions, and you really need that. So I think the new CEO, I don't know her personally, but I am, Sherry Chris is a good friend of mine, and Sherry's working with her and very high on her. And my understanding is she's very bright and she's got that key ingredient that every leader needs to have, which is she knows what she doesn't know. And I think she is smart enough to really, that's one of the reasons I think she brought Sherry on, to help her just to connect with people in the industry and get to know. So she's out there talking to people and listening and hearing what they have to say. And that's a really positive thing. So I'm hopeful that she can just rein in and get them out of some of the areas they don't need to be in. The money that has been spent on some technology initiatives and on, a lot of training things. So there's so many other places and people out there who do that and do it very well, that's not the business they need to be in. And so I'd love to see them get back on course and really focus on standards. I know, Danielle, you and I have talked a lot about that. That's something that I think NAR could play a role in. They don't control licensing and the standards to get in the business, and they do have some certifications and that sort of thing, but that's sort of the old school way. I think one of the things you and I talked about was, you know, if you could have something that really indicated um, someone's ability in the business. So that might be not just that they passed a test or took a course, but that they, you know, have been in it for a certain period of time, that they apprenticed under somebody who, you know, is a really proficient professional, that they do a certain amount of business, so that, you know, it would be a way for consumers to identify the good from the not so good. And sadly, you know, it's such an easy business to get into, to get a license, and you know, you don't really, you can pass a real estate license exam without knowing how to do a transaction. That's not really what they cover there. So you get people who, you know, they learn by doing, and that's at your expense if you happen to be a client in some cases. So I'd love to see something where there was a little more methodical track that people could get on. And then when they reach certain milestones, they're recognized for that. And then that would help consumers really understand, who am I getting here? And that's not to, doesn't mean that you want to discourage the young people, but as an example, like I used to say to young agents, which is tough, you know, if you're young in age and you haven't been in the business, having that credibility can be a tough thing to get. I'd say, you know, go do on-site sales for a while, work in a new construction neighborhood, because you'll learn the business that way. You don't have to prospect, but you get some experience under your belt. And that's just a great way to kind of segue in. And I've known some agents, young agents in their mid-20s, making a lot of money doing that. So anyway, I think the standards issue in the business is an area where NAR could have some real influence, and that I would love to see them focus on that and on the lobbying thing, and maybe get out of some of these other. It's not easy to do. It's unraveling a long-standing, very politically charged kind of an organization.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you hear this all the time. I think this year has been talked a lot about it. When there's more agents than there are homes for sale, that tells me there's something that's got to change here, you know, and I think something's got to shift. So yeah, no, those notes are really, really, those are great ones, Pam. Thanks for sharing your thoughts.
And you have a lot of, and I have, actually, I'm thinking of a friend of mine who lives near me now, and she's a very good agent, but she's not a rainmaker. She doesn't, I try to get her to do things to market herself, and she's not comfortable doing that, but I would work with her in a heartbeat, and have sent her. In fact, one of our friends just bought a house down here a couple of weeks ago. She was down here, and Debbie took her out, and she sold her a house. And she's one of these people that puts her heart and soul into it, spends way more time even after the transaction, helping them do a lot of things. So there's that. Sometimes you get the really proficient people, but they're not the ones you're hearing about because they don't market themselves, and they're not the bang your chest billboard, I'm the top one in the world kind of thing. So, which brings up another thing that drives me crazy. We have all these, in the business, we have all these top lists of, Steve Murray started, I thought, the first really wonderful one, which was a ranking of brokerage companies, because he was able to somehow, and I've teased him about this for years, somehow get brokers to give all of their financial information, so, their sales information, so that he could rank these brokerages. And this actually was, something I'll lose track of what I was going for, so I'll finish my first thought about this. But out of that, now we have 3 or 4 others that do the same kind of a list of brokerage companies. And now we have all of the Stephans and the other people who do the top list of the most influential or whatever. And I just, when those lists come out, you just look all across social media, and it's like, oh, I'm so honored to have been chosen. I want to go, like, get somebody else to do that. Don't do that to yourself. Like, don't sing your own praises. Get, either have somebody in the company who points out the folks that got on the list for your company, or something that is just less self-aggrandizing. I don't know. I'm old school. I feel
more
like
humility. You would like to see more humility.
Yeah. But the other point I was going to make, the opportunity thing, when Steve used to publish that list of the top brokerages, he would also sort of aggregate the different networks. So he would talk about Coldwell Banker, ERA, or Sotheby's, or whatever it was at the time. And I went to him one day, and we'd known each other. He's like my brother. I've known him since we started out together, and he's a good friend. But I said, Leading RE is a network too, and why can't we be on that list? Can't we aggregate our numbers? And also, he's like, well, I never thought about doing that anyway. So I got him to do that, and for many years we did more business than any of the franchise companies. And so that was that. I mean, that's just to. I think sometimes people and brokers are guilty of this. A lot of them, they don't sing their own praises enough. They don't really think about, well, where are we really strong? Are we the company that has the shortest days on market? We sell the homes quicker than everybody else, or the best price, or whatever. There is data somewhere there that they excel at, and pulling that out and really talking about it, because a lot of agents, I think, have a mistaken idea that it's all about them and it's their name and their brand. And the reality is, if I've seen this through the years where somebody would, it'd be in a conversation with the neighbor, and somehow it comes to the real estate person they worked with, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I loved her. She was great. She did such a good job." And what was her name? But they didn't remember that, but they remember the brokerage she was with. And that's something I think agents really lose sight of, that you need promote your own abilities, but also be with a company you're proud to be with and talk about that. I was at one of our Leading RE conferences a while back, and this one team leader of he was with Long and Foster, which a very large company, later bought by Home Services, and they were still members at the time. And so he was a very nationally renowned team leader, and he was in this one session. I had just kind of snuck in there, and I was sitting at a back table that he happened to be at, and listening to the speaker. And they were going around, and people were talking about introducing themselves. These were all top producers, and they got to him, and he never mentioned the company he was with, Long and Foster. And so at the break, I said, "What? I mean, I know who you are. Obviously, this is the first time I met him, but I'm really impressed by what you've accomplished. But why? I'm just curious. Why didn't you mention Long and Foster?" And he had this blank look on his face. He's, "Well, I didn't really think about that." And I said, "Well, these people are from all over the country. They may not remember your name, but they're going to remember if you said Long and Foster, and then they might go to the trouble to find you if they did." You know what I mean? And I think agents sometimes lose sight of that. It's not either or; it's both and.
Right. That's right. I think that's right. Well, I'm going to ask you, we've got 2 more questions here that we want you. The first one is, when you think about the future of real estate, what gives you the most hope?
The people in it, the entrepreneurial spirit that it requires to be successful. Not all, but I mean, I've just known so many wonderful people in this business, and I think they're resourceful. They keep coming up with ways to solve that latest problem, or adapt, or whatever it might be. So, and I think the other thing is, everybody I don't care whether our home ownership rates are down right now. They are. A lot of that is an affordability issue, which is a problem. That's another thing maybe NAR could work on. But at the end of the day, everybody still, I think most people still want to own a home, and there's still that desire. And it's not a simple transaction. Maybe it should be simpler, but it's not. And it's something people most of the time really need help with. Even seasoned buyers, wealthy people that have bought and sold a lot of homes, for them, it's a convenience thing. It's a time thing. They don't want to spend. They want an expert to do it for them. Michael Saunders, where I live, is still Leading RE member. In fact, she's getting ready to serve another chairmanship. I was kidding her about that last week. I said, "You've already been there and done that." She's, "I know, but it's fun. I'm going to do it again." So, what was I going to say? She forgot my train of thought. Something about the
importance of a home. The importance of a home to people.
Yeah,
and People, their time is valuable to them.
Yeah,
They
oh,
want
I know what I was
support,
going to say.
right?
She was telling this story about when, when the whole buyer agency thing came up with because of the litigation, where they had to do a much better job, presenting what they were offering as buyer agents and to earn that commission and everything. And she told the story of one of her top agents who had a guy who was looking to buy a $12 million, $15 million home, and so she went through. She said, "Now, I just want you to understand, you're going to need to sign a buyer agency agreement, and here's what I'll be doing for you, and here's what the commission rate is." And she said he didn't bat an eye. I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, if I'm going to spend that much money, I want to make sure I've got somebody, in my court handling this for me. I'm happy to do that." So, again, it's how it's presented. But I do think that there will always be people who need good agents, and that's why I think the future of the business is still bright. And but we also have to do a better job of explaining to them what we do for them, because there's a lot that's done behind the scenes, and they don't even understand that's happening. I know I'm not sure where it stands right now. There was an app that the guys who started, I think, the Next Home franchise were developing, and I'm not sure if it's out there active now. But I love the idea. It was basically a dashboard that you could have with your client, and so they'd see what the status was of the inspections, whatever was going on in the course of the transaction, and had a lot of other really cool features. And that's something that's been missing. I just, it's how do you find a graceful way to let people know what you're really doing for them so they understand the value?
Well, last question, Pam, you've accomplished so much in this career. What advice, if you were to look back and have the opportunity to talk to your 25-year-old self, what advice would you give her?
Probably to pay more attention and be more observant. And I was one of the, I look at my daughter who's doing very well. She's 34, and she's got a very good job for HBO Max. And but she's very focused, always knew exactly what she wanted. And when she got her master's after school, she wanted to be in the entertainment, on the business side in the entertainment field. And she went out, got alums to introduce her to all these people at all these different companies. And I was more like, when I got to a fork in the road, I knew which fork to take, but that was about it. I mean, I wasn't nearly as deliberate. And I think back, when I got out of college, this early 70s, and women were either nurses or secretaries or nuns or teachers. And I couldn't be a nun, I couldn't be a nurse. I would have not been a good teacher. So I was a secretary but in a television station, which was, where my major had been. And so I just instinctively, I knew that I didn't want to do that too long, or I get sort of slotted in that position. So I only worked there 2 years. They were great 2 years. I still have friends and wonderful experiences from that period. But when I left to get a junior management position somewhere in a what turned out to be the beginning of my real estate career, was a network at the time. And so I think back, I would have actually liked to have been done something on air. And I didn't really, if I had been a little more deliberate, I might have really worked at doing that. I had a girlfriend who was in the same role that I was, as a secretary in another department, who did exactly that. She ended up marrying the guitarist for Barbara Mandrell and moved to Nashville. And so, because she was in a different environment, she did what I didn't do, which was to really go after that. And so not that I regret anything. Things worked out well, and I loved my career, and I'd do it all over again. But if I think it's there's probably a happy medium in there somewhere, where you don't want to be so focused that if you don't get exactly that thing, you're not open to the other opportunities, because life takes you on paths that you don't expect, and sometimes that ends up being the better path. But at the same time, maybe just is there something I really think I want to do, and go for it, maybe a little more. So that would be the only thing I might change. But then again, I'm glad the way it turned out. So maybe it was
lucky for real estate, you didn't become on-air personality. Pam.
Here we are. We're doing a little TV thing, right?
Exactly. You're getting a little taste of it right now. You
Thank
didn't
you,
know
ladies.
it.
You helped me fulfill my ambition. I appreciate that.
A full circle. Here we are. Well, Pam, we just want to say thank you for everything today, spending time with us today and sharing your wisdom with all of our audience. And I know they're dying to hear from you. And I also just wanted to make sure we close by saying thanks for just being a great champion of women in the industry. You're very quiet and sort of subtle about it, but the truth is, we have benefited greatly from you as an advisor and as a mentor and as a friend. And we know that you do that not just for us, but for so many others. And so thank you for that. We really
Thank you. Well,
appreciate
you
it.
didn't ask me the important question, which is why I wanted to be an advisor for the
Tell us.
Helm.
Tell us.
And
You
it's
have to tell
because
us.
I love your passion. I love the fact that you want to help these other people in our business. And that's, that whole, when you ask about, you know, traits to try to, shoot for it, to me, it's always energy and enthusiasm and passion. You want to work with people who love what they do. And one of I remember one time a coach said to a group of luxury agents, he says, here are the words you should say to a client. I love what I do, and I'd love to do it for you. I mean, how much more telling is that? So that's what I love about you ladies. You care about all this, and you got a lot of passion for it, and I think the concept is great. So I continue to wish you all the best.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today.